Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of my podcast series, Sonia Space. This is episode 16, and I'm really excited and looking forward to talking about today's topic. And it really hits home for me. And I know many of you can relate to this topic today. I would also like to add that I would highly recommend that you check out my podcast trailer and my very first episode of my podcast series because I really go into why I started my podcast series in the first place. And one of the main reasons why I did this is for some South Asian representation and someone to speak on issues and stigmas that are present in the brown culture and the Desi community. And this not only applies to the Desi culture, this applies to all cultures where these issues can be prominent in those cultures as well. And for today's episode, I really wanted to get into things that we need to leave behind in the Desi and brown culture. Before we get started, I would like to point out that the points that I'm making are my opinions, and it might not be an opinion of another person. So please be respectful of my opinions, and we can agree to disagree as well. But these are the things that I've noticed with my upbringing and the things that I've been exposed to and the conversations that I've had. And these are the things that don't sit right with me. And I know many of you can relate to this and can agree with my opinions. So please be respectful of my opinions. These are not factual. These are just my interpretations that I've made with everything that I've been exposed to in the brown and Desi culture. All right, let's start with today's topic, which is things to leave behind in the Desi culture and the brown culture. The first point that I want to make out is that a woman's self-identity and worth shouldn't be tied to her getting married. And we shouldn't have this societal pressure on women to get married as that being her ultimate goal in life. Your life is not all about getting married. And to each their own, right? If a woman wants to get married, that's fine. But there shouldn't be the societal pressure for that woman to only focus on getting married and being a mother. A woman should also be appreciated for her career successes or traveling the world or building a business. These are also great milestones for people to have, for women to have in our society. And I feel like from a young age, girls are being told that you must get married in order to feel accepted and validated from the society. The other aspects of her life, her own personal aspirations and her desires are set aside, or it's to the point where she can only do a little bit of it, but her ultimate goal should be to be a wife and a mother. Not only is there pressure to be married, as that being the ultimate goal, but also the pressure of being married in your 20s and especially in your early 30s. I mean, the amount of pressure that builds up as you age is so bad. And it's really detrimental to one's mental health and well-being because it really causes some women to set aside their aspirations and goals in life to just marry anybody for society's sake. And that's not okay because women end up in unhealthy relationships or relationships where they're not happy because they did it at the expense of their parents' happiness or what the society will say. And that's not okay. That, to me, is living a life for others. And even women that are married, I feel like have such a hard time to even speak up about something that's going on in a relationship in terms of mistreatment, abuse, be it physical or emotional. A woman is supposed to be patient regardless of everything. And she is seen as a successful woman who can be in a marriage, regardless of it being abusive or not, and somehow make it work. But in reality, that woman is not healthy, is not in a healthy relationship. That woman is not happy and is building a life of resentment and hate. I feel like there's so much pressure on women to do what other people want and cannot live a life to fully express themselves. And I know we're getting better about this, but it still exists in the society. This also goes into my next point. Something that we really need to leave behind in the Desi and Brown culture is divorce should not be frowned upon or stigmatized. A woman has the right to divorce her husband if she's being mistreated emotionally, physically, or if she's unhappy in that relationship. I feel like women are forced to stay in the relationship at the expense of what the community will say, what other people will say. But from the get-go, she's already under a lot of pressure to get married and not knowing what she wants in the marriage. And I'm not saying that divorce should be your first option. That is if you've exhausted all of your options and you do not see the relationship working at all. It is not fair to you or your significant other to live a life like this where you cannot live with each other in peace and have love amongst yourselves in your relationship, knowing that you've married somebody that will work with you and someone that you can spend the rest of your life with is really important. And a woman should not be ostracized or feel bad for leaving a relationship that is not working out for her. But the community as a whole needs to support women and uplift women that do not want to be in relationships that are not working out for them and are standing up for themselves. We as a community need to do better because a woman is already feeling bad for going through a divorce because she is getting a lot of eyes from the society, and there's a lot of pressure for her to also get remarried as soon as possible because she's treated worthless or known as a quote unquote used item, which is not okay. Women are human beings. They're living, breathing beings that have feelings and a consciousness. We cannot continue to objectify women and treat them as objects. I feel like the women in our society need to do a better job of being a good representation for other women instead of stigmatizing women for standing up for themselves. The next thing that I would like to add to this list is the double standards that we have for men and women in the Desi culture. Women from a young age are expected to do all the daily house chores and the cooking and cleaning, while the men do not have that expectation on them at all. You know, the woman has to pick up her plate, but also her brother's plate, her father's plate, do all the cleaning, where the women just do everything for the men. And it's because the men work all day, but that's not an excuse to not have men do any of the house chores, because cooking and cleaning is an essential life skill. And in this day and age, both men and women work. And that is not okay to have these expectations from women to not only work, but pick up on all the house chores. And on top of that, be the one that is mainly responsible for raising the kid as well. That puts a lot of pressure on the women and is definitely not fair for them when you have these unbalanced set of priorities and responsibilities between men and women. And I think as a society, we need to do a better job with raising our sons and raising our daughters and give them equal treatment, but also expect equal responsibilities from the both of them. The next point that I would like to add, something that I think that we should leave behind in the brown and Desi culture. And I know this is going to ruffle some feathers and I'm going to get some hate for this, but I don't care because I have seen a lot of women struggle being in a situation like this. And it's that women are expected to live with their in-laws right after they get married. And it's been a tradition in the Pakistani culture and the Indian culture. And I do want to say there's nothing wrong with doing that if all the parties respect each other in the house and it doesn't impact the couple's relationship. And also for the fact that I totally understand that parents get old, some parents have health disabilities and need to be taken care of. And I'm all for that, but there shouldn't be an expectation for the women to get married and stay with their in-laws and pick up on all the housework and have all these duties and obligations as a daughter-in-law in the house. I think that is beyond me. Personally, I've seen it work for women, very rarely, but a lot of women have such a tough time having to live in a household with other adults who do treat them like children and not really as a married couple, not as its own entity. And the woman is expected to have these duties and fill these obligations for the in-laws when that shouldn't be the case. Especially for newlyweds, I feel like it's so important. That is a very important time to be with each other, to learn about each other. It's an adjustment for couples to live with each other as a married couple. And it makes it really hard for couples in terms of their privacy, their relationships. You know, if they're getting into an argument, disagreement, or a fight, there's other eyes on them at all times. I don't necessarily think that's okay for a relationship. Now, if the couple has communicated to each other and the son has communicated to his parents, hey, like he set boundaries, great. I hope that works out for couples that do live with in-laws, but it is very rare that I've seen it work out for couples that live with their in-laws, because I just feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of marriage, because you're literally living with other adults who have certain expectations of you. So I feel like as long as things are communicated and there are boundaries, great. But a lot of times those boundaries are violated. And again, to the point, women have a hard time speaking up for themselves and they're meant to show patience in the relationship. That isn't necessarily healthy for a woman's mental well-being. It shouldn't be an expectation of the daughter, the new daughter-in-law, to move in with her husband's family. The last thing that I would like to add to this list, and this is something that I've talked about before, I have a whole episode on this, and it's about mental health and how it is stigmatized in the Desi community. And I would like to come back on here and say that talking about mental health issues and traumas and someone dealing from depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, adults and children should be talked about openly. with an open mind is what I mean. It's not something that someone should be judged for at the end. I feel like we need to have more empathy and compassion for people that are struggling with a mental health issue. And I feel like this topic should be discussed openly within family members as well. And then there's nothing wrong with understanding your mind and your triggers and understanding why we are the way we are. We should have an open discussion about this and learn the consequences of our actions and how our actions can be impacting someone's state of mental health and mental well-being. I think these topics and these conversations are very important to have. And yeah, if it's too late, we'll try to instill it in your family. I feel like everyone is capable of having a conversation. It takes a little bit of time because it's not something that they've been exposed to growing up, or they were taught to not express their emotions, especially men. But I think it's okay to come into this conversation with love and empathy and compassion. And I feel like that creates an open line of communication within family members, within friends, within relationships. I think we're being better about discussing mental health issues, but we should be more consistent about it. And especially the younger generation, for couples that, are newly married or wanting to have kids and have young kids, I think this is a great opportunity to instill these conversations with children from the get-go. I think children being exposed to mental health issues and should be able to express themselves. And that all starts with making sure that the parents are also mentally stable and are working on themselves, right? Because children learn from examples. So yes, mental health and talking about mental health should really be prioritized in the Desi culture because we lack that type of communication in our society, in our lives for such a long time that I feel like with this newer generation, the younger generation, I think we can do a better job of making sure that these things are talked about. I would like to end this episode with an inspirational quote on breaking down barriers. And the quote is, "The biggest walls in life are those we build inside ourselves." I think we need to overlook what we've been taught and what we're doing with that information. And it takes a lot of courage and strength to overcome these obstacles and stand up for yourself. But one must understand that you're the only one that's really getting in your way. So at the end, it's all about breaking down our own barriers and overcoming these challenges that we have in front of us. It builds a lot of strength to work towards having a life of fulfillment and joy. Thank you so much for listening in today. I am so grateful for all the support and feedback I've been getting. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Sonia Space and follow me on Instagram for sneak peeks on upcoming episodes as well as other inspirational content. I hope your day goes well and I've left you feeling inspired. Bye-bye.